Hello viewers, welcome to today's lesson, and today's lesson is going to be on factorization of quadratic expressions. But before we begin, for those who are watching our channel for the first time, kindly subscribe so that anytime we do a video like this, you'll be notified and you'll be able to benefit in time. Now, when we talk about quadratic expressions, these are expressions in the form of a x squared plus bx plus c, where a, b, and c are constants. But for us now to understand how we factorize a quadratic expression is factorized using product sum method. That is, we need to talk about the product, we need to get the sum, and we also need the numbers. How do we get the product? The product is always the coefficient of x squared, which is a, we multiply by the constant c, and for us to get the sum, we are going to get the coefficient of x, which is b, and in this case, we are going to look for two numbers whose product will give us ac, and the sum, of course, will be b. Then from there we will be able to factorize. Why? We cannot be able to factorize a quadratic expression the way it is because it has three terms. What we normally do, we split the middle term into two using the numbers. Then from there we shall be having four pairs which can be factorized into the pairs of 2, 2. For example, what if somebody tells you to factorize, and you are supposed to factorize, for example, x squared plus, let's say, minus 57x plus 110. We can be able to identify the coefficients of x squared, which is the quadratic term, the linear term, and of course the constant there. So our a is going to be equal to the coefficient of x squared, which is 1. Our b is going to be minus 57, and our c is going to be 110. So what we are going to do, we are going to get the product, we get the sum, and then we get two numbers whose product will be. So for us to get the product, we are going to take a times c, which is going to be 110. Then our sum is going to be equal to the coefficient of x, which is minus 57. From there we need two numbers whose product is 110, and the same numbers will give you a sum of 57 negative. So the two numbers will be minus 55 and minus 2, such that minus 55 times minus 2 will give you 110, and then minus 55 plus minus 2 will give you 57. Once you have the numbers correct, you come and write this expression, that is x squared minus, this time round we replace the middle term using the numbers. That is, we are going to have minus 55, of course, x, then minus 2x plus 110. You realize we have four parts of this expression. There is nothing we have done, because if you take minus 55x minus 2x, you are going to get 57. After doing that, we factorize now at this point by taking them in pairs. So you look at these two terms and note what is common. If you look at x squared and minus 55x, you realize x appears in both sides, so x is factored outside. Then what are we going to put here so that when we multiply with x, you get x squared, it is x, so that x times x, you get x squared. Then what are we going to put here so that we multiply with x, we get minus 55x, it is going to be minus 55. Then once you get this bracket, just put it here, which is x minus 55. Then now look at this other pair. What are we supposed to put here so that we multiply with x, we get minus 2x, and when we multiply with minus 55, we get positive 110. It is going to be minus 2. After doing that now, you connect the two terms which are outside. We are going to have x minus 2. Then we pick one from the brackets. We are going to have x minus 55, and by so doing, you would have factorized this expression. So let us take a few questions so that you can be able to understand how to factorize quadratic expressions. Anyway, now let us have question number, let me now call it question number 2. You are supposed to factorize completely, and you have the expression that is 28x squared plus 3x minus 1. So for you to factorize this quadratic expression, we said we factorize a quadratic expression using product sum method. That is, we need the product, we need the sum, and also the numbers. How do we get the product? To get the product, you take the value of a, or the coefficient of x squared, which is 28, you multiply by the constant c, and in this case you are going to get negative 28. And for us to get the sum is always equal to the coefficient of the linear term, and in this case it is 3. So we need two numbers whose product is minus 28 and their sum will give us positive 3. The two numbers we have are going to be negative 4 and 7. If you take negative 4 times 7, you are going to get negative 28, and if you take negative 4 plus 7, it will give you a sum of 3. After getting the numbers, you come and rewrite that expression. We are going to have 28x squared. This time round, the linear term is replaced with the numbers. We are going to have minus 4, but of course x, then plus 7x minus 1, for us to be able now to factorize at this point. Once you have 4 parts of that expression, we take them in pairs of 2, so that we can be able to factorize them. So what is common between these two parts? 1, 4 can divide itself. It can also divide 28, and therefore 4 is common. And of course, if you look at this and this, x is also common. So 4x is common, and therefore we move it outside. In other words, we factor it out. Then we ask ourselves, what are we supposed to put here so that we multiply with 4x for us to get 28x squared? It is going to be 7x. Then what are we supposed to put here so that we multiply with 4x so that we get minus 4x? It is going to be simply minus 1. Once you have this bracket, just put it here. We are going to have 7x minus 1. Then we ask ourselves, what are we supposed to put here so that we multiply with 7x for us to get 7x? Then we multiply with minus 1 so that we can get minus 1. The answer is going to be 1, such that 1 times 7x, you get 7x, then 1 times minus 1, you get minus 1. After doing that, we collect the two terms which are outside the brackets. We are going to have 4x and 1, and in this case this one is positive, therefore we join the two using a plus. Then of course we pick 1 from the brackets. We are going to have 7x minus 1, and that is the answer to this question. Let us take another question so that you can be able to understand how these questions can be set and how you are supposed to work them out. So let me number this as 3, and then you are supposed to simplify. You are supposed to simplify the expression. Simplify the expression, and the expression we have is 16m squared minus 9n squared, everything divided by 4m squared minus mn, and of course minus 3n squared. So if you look at this question, you realize the question has two parts, and it's a fraction. That is, we have the numerator and the denominator. And for us to be able to work it out or simplify, we need to start by working with the numerator first, and the numerator is 16m squared minus 9n squared. This is a product of two squares because if you look at two parts, they have direct square roots. If you want to simplify the first one, you are going to take the square root of 16, which is actually 4, and the square root of m squared is going to be m. The square root of 9 is 3, and the square root of n squared is going to be n, but we know the square root of a number is plus or minus, therefore we are going to have a plus here, and of course another similar bracket which is 4n, but this time round minus 3n, and by so doing you would have done with the numerator part. Then now moving to the denominator. The denominator is 4m squared minus mn minus 3n squared, which is quadratic in nature. Since it is quadratic in nature, again, we are going to try and work it out using the product sum method, and directly you need the product here, you need the sum, and of course you need the numbers. If you want to get a product, it is always A times C, and if you take 4 times minus 3, you are going to get negative 12. Then the sum is going to be equal to the coefficient of the linear term, which is actually negative 1. And for us to get the numbers, we need now to get the numbers whose product is minus 12. And the same numbers will give you a sum of negative 1. The two numbers are going to be negative 4 and 3. So if you take negative 4 times 3, you get minus 12. And if you take negative 4 plus 3, you are going to get minus 1. Once we have the numbers, we come and rewrite this expression. That is, we are going to have 4m squared minus the linear term is replaced with the numbers. It's going to be 4, but of course mn, then plus 3mn, such that anytime we add the 2, we go back to the original equation, and lastly we minus 3n squared. So once we have the 4 parts of this expression, we are going to factorize them in pairs. So we ask ourselves, what is common between these two parts? We can see 4 on both sides, and of course m is appearing on both, so our 4m is common, and therefore we factor it outside. Then we ask ourselves, what are we supposed to put here? We multiply by 4m, we get 4m squared. This one is going to be m. Then what are we supposed to put here so that we multiply by 4, we get minus 4mn. It is going to be minus n, such that if we take this times this, you get 4m squared. This times this, you get minus 4m. Once you have this bracket, you should not worry, just put it here. Then from there, we ask ourselves, what are we supposed to put here so that we multiply with m, we get 3mn. It is going to be 3n. It's going to be 3n. 3n times m, you get 3mn. And of course 3n times minus n, you get 3n squared. Once we have done that, we can combine those two terms which are outside the brackets. We have 4m, we have 3n, because this one is a positive. We are going to connect the two using a plus, and of course we pick one bracket from the brackets. We pick one term from the brackets because it is the same, so we are going to have m minus n, and by so doing we also have our denominator there. So since the question was a fraction, we are going to put the denominator, that is the numerator over denominator, and in this case our numerator is going to be 4m plus 3n into brackets. Then we have 4m minus 3n, everything divided by our denominator. Here we have 4m plus 3n, then into brackets we have m minus n. Once you have done that, you look at what is common between the numerator and the denominator so that this one and this one will cancel, so that we get our final answer as 4m minus 3n, everything divided by m minus n, and that is the answer to that question. Moving to our last question, let us do the last part of our learning today, so that you can be able to know exactly how to factorize a quadratic expression. So if I can call this one number 4, you are supposed to simplify. So you simplify, we have p squared, let me write it here, we have p squared plus 2pq plus q squared, everything divided by p cubed minus pq squared plus p squared q minus q cubed. So if you look at this part again, we have the numerator and the denominator, and we are going to begin by looking at the numerator. And the numerator is p squared plus 2pq plus q squared. If again you look at the numerator, it is quadratic in nature, and therefore we are going to simplify or factorize it using product sum method. And in this case, we need the product, we need the sum, and of course the numbers. So to get the product, we are going to take the coefficient of the quadratic term here, which is 1. We multiply by the constant, which is actually q squared there, and our product is going to be 1, because we have 1 here, 1 there. So 1 times 1, you get 1. Then our sum is going to be equal to the coefficient of the linear term, and our sum is going to be 2. Now we need two numbers whose product is 1, and the same numbers will give us a sum of 2. Those numbers are going to be 1 and 1, because 1 times 1 will give us 1, and 1 plus 1 you get 2. After getting the numbers, you come and rewrite the expression. We are going to have p squared, but this time round we replace the middle term using the numbers. This one is going to be plus pq, because this is like 1 pq plus another pq, so that pq plus pq will give us 2pq plus our q squared. Having split that into 2, now we have 4 parts which can be simplified in pairs. If you look at the first 2 terms or parts, between this term and this term, which one is common? We realize p is appearing on both sides, and therefore p is common. So what are we going to put here times p so that we get p squared? It's of course p. And what are we going to put here so that we multiply with p, you get pq? We are going to have positive word q. If we come here again, we can be able to factorize this separately without taking this bracket to the other side. What is common between this and this? We can see it is q into, what are we supposed to put here times q so that we get pq? It is p, then plus of course q, so that q times q you get q squared. You realize this bracket and this bracket are the same, and therefore now we are going to unite, or to simply combine the terms which are outside. We have p and a q. Since q is positive, there we are going to combine it using a plus sign, and of course we pick one bracket which is going to be p plus q, and by so doing you have done what we call the upper part. Going to the denominator here, the denominator is p cubed minus pq minus pq squared plus p squared q minus q cubed. If you look at the denominator, it has 4 parts already, and therefore we are going to factorize it directly by taking this in pairs. So we come here and check what is common between this part and this part. You realize p is appearing on both sides, and p is going to be common. and therefore we factor it outside. In other words, we remove it outside. Then we ask ourselves, what are we going to put here? So that we multiply with p, we get our p cubed. It will be p squared, such that p squared times p, you get p cubed. Then of course, what are we supposed to put here times p? You get pq squared. We are going to have minus q squared. Third part has been done that way. Then we go to the second part. We can either move this bracket here, then we look at what is common, or we factorize it separately. So what is common between these two parts is actually q, and therefore we factor q outside. So what are we to put here so that we multiply with q, we get p squared q, it will be p squared. Then what are we supposed to put here times q, we get q minus cubed. So we are going to have our minus q squared. And by so doing, you have done that part. But what we are going to do is actually combine the two parts which are outside. Then we pick one bracket because they are the same. So we are going to have p plus of course q, because third q is positive, into p squared minus q squared. But if you look at this part again, it is the product of two squares which can be worked out like this. So we are going to have p plus q. Then to factorize this, because it's the product of two squares, the square root of p squared is going to be p, the square root of q squared is going to be q. But we know the square root of a number is plus or minus, therefore we have this one as a plus, and we are going to have the same bracket p, but this time round minus q. Why? Because the square root of a number is plus or minus the number. From there, we are going to unite or to combine now the denominator, that is the numerator and the denominator. Our numerator, from the workings here, we have p plus q into p plus q over our denominator is going to be p plus q into p plus q into p minus q. So this one and this one will go, this one and this one will go, and our answer is going to be equal to, everything has gone there, this one is going to be 1 out of p minus q, and that is the answer to that question. Anyway, so for those who have the comments or any questions that they might want to ask, you can go to the comment section, you send the questions, and we shall be glad to assist you. Thank you and welcome.